Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I'm going to recap a 2021 Russian live-action, computer-animated fairy tale fantasy film called Upon the Magic Roads. The movie is about Foal and his friend John, who go on an unforgettable journey as they outsmart the tyrant king, catch the firebird, and find John's true love on the magic roads. So without further ado, let's find out if Foal and John can successfully complete their tasks and find his love. The movie begins in the outskirts of Russia, where a bright stream of light passes through the wheat fields. Soon, the light takes the shape of a mare that's destroying the crops before it vanishes into thin air. The next morning, the old farmer calls his three sons to show them their trampled wheat field. The man instructs his sons to keep watch at night to find the culprit behind the destruction. The youngest brother, John, is then given the duty of keeping watch. Despite his fear of the dark, John agrees to earn his father's trust. Later that night, the other brothers are asleep, while John is wide awake to find the culprit. That's when he notices the shadow of a mare and throws a rope in its direction. The mare suddenly starts to drag John through the fields. He then gets lifted into the air and looks down at the lovely village. Initially, he is delighted by such an amazing view of the village, but his joy soon comes to an end when the mare crashes and the two end up in a swamp. When John sees the poor animal drowning, he tries to pull out the gigantic mare by himself, but all his efforts are in vain. Eventually, he manages to pull the mare out with the help of a wheat mill nearby. Overjoyed with John's kindness, the mare sheds a tear of gratitude. John then makes the mare promise not to trample on their fields and set it free. Once again, the mare vanishes into the sky before John sees the trampled wheat field and wonders if he will get a beating from his dad about the destruction. The next morning, John wakes up in the stable only to discover two glorious black royal horses. So, while he's staring at them in awe, he hears someone talking and grabs a pitchfork to defend himself. John is shocked when he sees a tiny magic foal with a humpback who can somehow speak like a person. The foal tells John that he has been sent to help him. He further reveals that the mare he met earlier is his mother and that she has given him these two horses. Soon, the old farmer sees the condition of the trampled wheat field and screams out in anger. That's when Foal leaps into action and carries John on his back as they sprint away. On their way, John tells the foal that he wants to sell the horses since they are desperately in need of money. But before John's family can catch them, Foal agrees to help and whistles to call the horses to their location. The two head towards the busy market with the horses hoping to find a suitable buyer. When John gets there, he gets flooded with offers from buyers eager to get their hands on the majestic horses. But out of greed, he decides to keep the animals, wanting to sell them to the wealthiest person. It turns out that the person is none other than the king. The king sees John walking toward the magnificent palace and gets captivated by the horses. The king claims that a poor farmer like John could never have afforded the horses on his own, so rather than buying them, he commands his men to snatch the horses from him. Once again, John asks Foal for help because he has no money and feels insulted. Foal blows a whistle once more to signal the horses to return to John's side. However, during the process, the horses throw the king into bags of flour. King is furious but stays calm in front of the people. After that, John suggests a deal, asking for 2 silver hats in exchange for the horses. One of the king's staff points out that the horses will ultimately keep returning to John. Keeping that in mind, the king presents him with the prestigious position of the most significant groom in the palace. Thrilled, John accepts the opportunity, and with an announcement, the entire crowd begins to cheer for him. They think he is the animal whisperer. The king grows resentful of John as he enjoys increasing popularity among the people and looks for a way to have him put to death. He looks for a valid explanation, but he cannot find one. But one day his courtier offers him a thought. His plan requires John to set out on a mission and capture the mythical firebird. John will undoubtedly fail because it is an impossible task, which can be used as justification to have him executed. Soon, the king issues the order, and John becomes determined to finish the mission. John is determined to impress the villagers despite Foal's advice that the firebird can't be tamed and that capturing it might be an impossible task. The two eventually begin their journey and go into the woods to gather some dream nuts that they can use to tempt the Firebird. When John expresses interest in trying the nuts, Foal forbids it and points out that they have sedative properties. They continue walking until they arrive at the Firebird's home, an oasis in the desert. They notice a warning about liquid sand. John hides close by after throwing the dream nuts. The majestic bird soon appears from the ground and starts to eat the nuts. As planned, the nuts make the bird drowsy, but before it passes out, it spots the two and begins to attack. On multiple occasions, John and Foal came close to being killed, but they always save one another. However, John was finally able to catch the Firebird with chains after it passed out because of the nuts. The next day, John and Foal discover the Firebird sitting on the ground looking weak and shedding a fiery tear. Foal explains that the bird loses all of its energy if it stays on the ground for a prolonged time. After hearing this, John's empathy takes over and he decides to release the bird. The bird regains its fire when John removes the chains and flies off into the distance after leaving a fire feather for John. Foal advises John to stay away from the kingdom now that he has failed because the king might execute him. But John is confident that the fire feather is proof that they succeeded in capturing the Firebird. When they come back, the king orders their execution. John makes an effort to prove that he caught the bird but released it out of empathy. The king is reluctant to believe him and passes his death orders. But just then, the magnificent Firebird shows up, illuminating the kingdom brightly. The people look confused to see the Firebird obeying John's instructions. As a result, the king resentfully agrees to let John live and throws a celebration in his honor. The king becomes increasingly frustrated and orders John to find the king maiden who lives in the Ice Kingdom atop a high rock. Yet again, another impossible mission. The king is certain that John will fail, so John is informed about the king's new assignment and he accepts the task without any hesitation. After crossing the deadly high rock mountains, John and Foal finally reach the palace where the king maiden lives. They soon learn that a huge wall of ice is blocking the palace, making it impossible for them to enter. John manages to break through the ice barrier using the Firebird's feather. He pours a large amount of water on the wall to melt it, but unfortunately, Foal freezes in a ball of ice and tumbles off the cliff. He makes a poor landing, but he escapes without getting hurt. Meanwhile, John enters the palace and meets the Empress. He introduces himself as the king's matchmaker, but the Empress tells him that she has no interest in getting married because there are no more heroes left. That's when she jumps off a cliff to put John to the test, and he follows her in an effort to save her. Impressed, the Empress uses her gown as a parachute and begins to land slowly. Just then, John unintentionally tears the gown, dropping both at high speed. They await a torturous death until Foal appears bearing a set of brand new wings and saves them both. The three set up camp in the forest and continued their journey to the kingdom the next day. Foal suggests John leave the Empress behind and run away, but he refuses. John's loyalty surprises the Empress, who has been listening in on their conversation. When the group finally makes it to the kingdom, John is yet again welcomed as a hero. Everyone is shocked to see that John has survived his mission, which only increases the king's resentment towards him. The king must still give him another reward in spite of this. That same night, John confides in Foal his feelings for the Empress and decides to go see her. He takes some flowers and climbs up to her window, but some courtiers arrive carrying clothes for her to wear. Later, the Empress finally meets the king, and she is shocked to discover that he's older than her father. John is envious of seeing them together. The king wishes to marry the Empress the next day, but she explains that it is customary for her family to get married with a unique ring to postpone the wedding. Unfortunately, the ring washed away in the water. When the king finds out about this, he is furious and assigns John to yet another impossible task. Foal thinks over John's irrational decisions that night when he witnesses the whale spirit in the sky. Soon, Foal communicates with the sun, moon, and wind. He discovered that the ring is located inside the stomach of a massive whale that has since transformed into an island. The next day, John and Foal made their way to the whale only to find out that she had been chained. Foal communicates with the whale and learns that some sailors punished the whale for devouring multiple ships. She was young at the time, but she now regrets what she did. The whale starts crying, which gives John the idea to make her sneeze and escape the chains. They entered the whale's nostrils and poked inside it with the tip of the foal's feathers. The strategy worked, and soon the whale started to scratch itself, and, in the process, it broke free of all its chains and released the trapped ships after decades. The whale then presents John and Foal with a priceless ring as a token of appreciation. Soon, the two proceed to the Empress's window to deliver the ring. That's when the courtiers see John and rush to arrest him. The noise awakens the king, who quickly grabs his weapon and heads for his window. When the king sees Foal, he immediately shoots him. Meanwhile, the guards take John into custody after falsely accusing him of kidnapping the king maiden. Later, a chick strangely shows up outside the Empress's window and leads her to a wounded foal. Meanwhile, the king prepares to marry the Empress, but to buy some more time, she demands that she should take a bath in 3 cauldrons, one with boiling water, one with ice water, and one with boiling milk to look younger. Although the plan is clever, it causes John to face even bigger issues. The king wants John to test the cauldrons. The Empress tells Foal in secret during the night that there is a way to counteract the boiling contents effects. She explains that the deadly effects can be neutralized by placing her grandmother's ring in the first cauldron, a feather from the firebird in the second, and the flower of life and death in the third cauldron. She says the success of this plan will determine whether John survives. The foal is aware that the mission is dangerous and could result in John's death. But he goes in search of the flower even though he can no longer fly. He uses his lightning speed to get to the edge of the world and finds the flower. As he is about to pluck the flower, it informs him that whoever picks it will die. Foal picks the flower to save John despite the terrifying warning. The king orders John to jump in the cauldrons while claiming that he is giving him a chance at redemption. John bravely declares his love for the Empress before jumping into the first cauldron. At the same time, the Empress successfully throws the ring into the cauldron to help John escape unharmed. The firebird drops a feather into the second cauldron, once more protecting John. When it comes to the third and final cauldron, John is saved just in time, all thanks to Foal for timely bringing the flower. Seeing John looking younger, the king jumps into the first cauldron to rejuvenate himself, but as soon as he does, a massive bubble appears and engulfs him. The kingdom's citizens only laugh at his misfortune and start chanting to support John. In the meantime, the Empress and John become aware of Foal's disappearance and start looking for him. They find him patiently waiting for his death since he had plucked the flower, but the Empress reveals that the flower's warning was just a test of bravery. She additionally clarifies that if Foal hadn't picked the flower, he would have died, but not now. When Foal hears this, he joyfully stands up and hugs his best friend. People cheer for John and demand that he take over as king. He gladly accepts and promises to use all of his abilities to defend the kingdom. The movie ends with John and the Empress getting married and ruling the land as its new king and queen. With that being said, that is it for today's video. Let us know what you thought about the movie in the comments section below. Thanks for watching.